My name is Ava. I'm 32 and live in a quiet town just under an hour's drive from Boston. My mornings are simple and routine. I brew myself a cup of espresso, listen to the forecast, and take a short walk to my office, which is only a block or so away. I'm the co-founder of a biotech startup in the healthcare sector. It's one of those jobs that doesn't translate well in small talk, especially with people who assume office job means spreadsheets and data entry. My family never really understood what I do. Or maybe they just never cared enough to try. I've always been the odd one out, the younger sister who wore plain clothes, skipped the makeup, and was usually buried in a Zoom call or glued to her laptop. Elise, my older sister, was the golden child. She's 3 years older than me and in their eyes has always been everything I wasn't. Elegant, composed, warm, and effortlessly charming. Even in our family photos, I often looked like an afterthought, just a faded figure behind Elise's brilliance. Holidays were her stage. Thanksgiving, Christmas, you name it. Everyone huddled around her, showering her with compliments. Elise, you look absolutely radiant. Elise, a doctor? That's impressive. And when it came to me, if anyone acknowledged me at all, it was a vague, Ava's doing something in biotech, I think. It always felt like I was a footnote in someone else's story. For years, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, stayed behind the scenes, picked up the slack, then maybe, eventually, my parents would be proud of me too. But the applause was always reserved for her. The attention, the approval, even the expectations. I was invisible. They never knew I'd been staying at the office until midnight managing a crisis for a public health initiative worth nearly $2 million. They never asked what it was like to co-found a company with 3 close friends fresh out of college. When people ask me about my family, I just smile softly and say we haven't talked in a while. Not because I'm hiding anything, but because honestly, there's nothing left to say. It's been over 2 years since we last spoke. No calls, no texts, no birthday messages. Just silence, like a landline no one bothers to fix anymore. I used to think family was where you could always return. That illusion shattered on my mother's birthday. It happened in late March. I had just finalized a successful funding round with an investment firm out of New York. Feeling proud, I cleared my calendar and planned to take a few days off. I wanted to fly back early to help with preparations, something simple, just like I always had. When I called home, my dad answered. I'm thinking of coming in a bit early, I told him. Let me know if you need anything picked up or taken care of. His voice wasn't upset. Just off. There was a pause, then a quiet throat clear. Ava, if you can, don't come home this year. I blinked in confusion. Maybe he was worried I'd be overwhelmed at work. It's okay, Dad. I've cleared everything. I really want to help. But this time, his tone was different, flat, unbending. Elisa's bringing her new boyfriend. He's a CFO. Smart, polished, someone with presence. Your job? It's hard to explain. You being here would just bring comparisons and make things awkward. It's better if you stayed away. My whole body stiffened. I gripped the phone tighter, my breath stuck in my throat. Are you saying I make the family look bad? That I shouldn't come home because I'm not good enough? I asked, each word tight with disbelief. He didn't deny it. In fact, he doubled down. If you're planning on coming anyway, then don't call me your father. Then he hung up. No hesitation. No second thoughts. The room around me fell into a hush. The espresso I'd been holding had gone cold. I stared blankly into the space in front of me, the words still ringing in my ears like a fracture spreading through glass. I didn't cry. I just sat there frozen. That was the moment I realized I didn't belong to this family anymore, not really. And maybe I never did. I sat in my usual spot by the window, sunlight spilling in through the thin white curtains. It was early spring, but no warmth reached me. My father's words repeated in my mind, sharp and final. If you're planning on coming anyway, then don't call me your father. I glanced down at my hands. My fingers trembled, not from rage, but from something far colder. A line had been crossed. All my life, I had believed that even if I wasn't their favorite, I was still their daughter. That belief was gone now. I stood up, crossed the room, and sat at my desk. Without thinking twice, I opened my laptop and logged into my banking account. For more than 2 years, I had been sending money to my parents every month. I paid their utility bills, electricity, water, internet, even their cable, nearly $6,000 every month. That didn't include extra cash I sent when Mom said the fridge broke down or Dad needed new tires. They never once asked if it was manageable for me. They just said, Elisa's having a hard time since the job switch. If you can help, that would be great. And I always helped. Quietly. As if I'd signed some invisible contract the moment I got my first paycheck. I scrolled through my transaction history. The total stared back at me, $15,720. My stomach dropped. Not out of regret, but because even after all that, I was still never enough. I hovered over the scheduled payments. Power. Water. Wi-Fi. One by one I clicked. Cancel. 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 Little banners appeared. Auto payment successfully canceled. No alarms. No pop-ups. Just silence. The kind I'd always known from my family. That night, sleep never came. Not because I was furious, but because I kept replaying it all. The words. The silence. The realization that they had discarded me so easily just to impress some man Elise was dating. Someone I had never even met. I had been compared all my life. This was the first time I'd been rejected so blatantly, not just ignored, but deliberately cast aside, as if my very presence was an inconvenience. When my mother's birthday came, I didn't reach out. No call. No card. No post online. Not because I was angry, but because I simply couldn't pretend anymore. At exactly 5 o'clock that evening, I was sitting on my balcony with a cup of peppermint tea when my phone buzzed. It was my mom. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then let it dim back to black. A second later, a message appeared. Ava, why is the power out? Can you check for us? I placed the tea down, already expecting the next ping. It was from my dad. No water. No internet. Can you call the companies? Your mother's panicking. I sat motionless, eyes focused on the distant tree line. No fury, no heartbreak, just a quiet numbness. Not once did they ask how I was doing. Not one word about the last call. Just another expectation for me to step in and solve everything like I always had. Then Elise texted, the internet's down, guests are arriving, and mom's in tears. What's going on? I picked up my phone and began typing. 3 weeks ago, Dad told me that if I insisted on coming home, I should no longer call him my father. So, I'm just honoring his request. If this is inconvenient, maybe ask someone you're not embarrassed to introduce to your guests. I paused. Then I erased the message. Not because I doubted it, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. They never really heard me. Only what they wanted to hear. I placed the phone face down, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes. My small apartment was still, no judgment, no raised voices, no guilt tripping. The next morning, Elise left a voicemail. Her voice was tight with blame. Mom hasn't stopped crying since last night. Do you even realize how important yesterday was? Julian met the family for the first time and everything got ruined. You're unbelievably selfish. I listened to every word. Then I shut my phone off. For most of my life, I hadn't allowed myself to be selfish. Maybe it was finally time. I logged into my work email and reviewed the weekend operations report. One subject line immediately stood out. New Jersey staff transfer to Boston, awaiting approval. I opened the attachment and skimmed the list of names. And then I stopped. Julian Hale. My heart gave a startled jolt. That name, I remembered hearing it just 3 days ago. My mother had mentioned it in passing. Elise's boyfriend, Julian, works at a major company. I looked closer at the file. Current position, head of finance, New Jersey branch. Transferring to Boston headquarters. Approver, Ava Whitmore, co-founder. A small involuntary laugh escaped me. The kind that comes when life gets too ironic to be real. The world was smaller than I thought. And the story? It was just beginning. I remained still, my hand resting on the mouse, heart strangely hollow. Like something that had been holding me together had finally let go. The number flashed in my mind. $16,000, not a cent of it missed or delayed, all paid quietly, every single month. And not once had they said thank you. I scrolled through the past transactions. $192.48 for power, $136.72 for water, $248.50 for internet and cable. Month after month, I covered their household, like a shadow accountant they never acknowledged. And then the memory surfaced. A late-night call from my mother nearly a year ago. Ava, the bathroom pipe burst. Can you call someone? Elise is on vacation with her boyfriend. You're the only one left. It had sounded innocent. But now I saw it clearly. I wasn't cherished like a daughter. I was just the backup plan, the fixer, the one who stepped in when their favorite couldn't. And now? Now I was unwelcome because I didn't photograph well next to a polished CFO. Everything finally made sense. All those years I gave everything money, time, silence. But love? That had never been part of the exchange. I was remembered only when something needed to be handled. But when I needed anything, there was no one. My phone lit up again. Another message from my mother. Ava, I know yesterday got a little tense, but if you could handle the internet bill, that would be great. Elise is trying to keep the guests comfortable. No apology. No reference to the conversation that shattered everything. Just another polite demand. I didn't respond. I simply placed the phone down and walked out onto the porch. The fading April sun cast long shadows across the yard. Boston hadn't warmed up yet, but the chill in the air felt oddly refreshing. I thought about Julian, the boyfriend I had been deemed unworthy to stand beside. And now the employee set to report directly to me. If life were a dark comedy, this was the punchline. I went back inside, sat at my desk, and opened the final email. Subject line, new hire confirmation, Julian Hale, Boston office transfer. I clicked into his profile. Age, credentials, degrees, it all checked out. It was the kind of resume Elise would fawn over. Professional, polished, presentable. There was even a photo attached. And then it hit me, I had met him once briefly at a conference 6 months ago. He'd shaken my hand and called me co-founder Whitmore with polite indifference. We never made the connection. Then again, I'd never paid much attention to Elise's romantic interests. Now I had a decision to make, approve the transfer or don't. But I realized I didn't need to intervene. The moment had already arrived. I just had to sit back and let it unfold. Let them see. Let her see. The sister they thought was beneath them was now the woman her boyfriend worked for. The next morning, Julian walked into the office. He stepped into mine with a folder, looking slightly on edge. When he looked up and saw me, his eyes widened. Ava, he asked, stunned. I gave him a calm, measured smile. Welcome to Pacific Genomics. I'll be reviewing the financial projections for this quarter. I look forward to working together. Julian stood frozen. His face drained of color. No one in my family had ever known I helped build this company. Not one of them had ever asked. They assumed I was just another office worker, quiet, forgettable. I didn't elaborate. I just slid the contract across the desk. Julian took it and exited the room in silence. I leaned back in my chair. I wasn't elated. I wasn't bitter. I just felt like for once the wheel had turned. And for once I didn't have to explain anything. The truth had spoken for itself. On the morning of my mother's birthday, Boston was cloaked in a dense, gray fog. The air felt thick, heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. I poured a cup of strong black coffee and sat quietly by the window, watching the yard disappear into the haze. I had no plans. No messages, no calls, no fake social media posts. I just wanted to let the day pass without me. At 9 o'clock sharp, my phone vibrated. A text from Mom. Ava, sweetheart, I think the power's out. Can you check? It's a big day. I set the phone face down on the table. Her tone was warm, gentle, pretending everything was fine, as if I hadn't been told weeks earlier by my father that I embarrassed the family and should stay away. 15 minutes later, another message. This time from Dad. Still no power. No water either. Is there an issue with the payments? Call the provider. Now. Short. Cold. There was no mention of the previous conversation. No acknowledgement that I had been excluded. Just a demand like I was still the silent assistant managing their household. I sighed. For over 2 years, I had paid every bill: electricity, water, internet, cable, on time, without fail. I canceled all of them the night my father made it clear that my presence was unwelcome. And now, on the day Elise had planned to present her polished boyfriend to the family, the entire house was in disarray. No power. No running water. No internet. Exactly as expected. By 11, the flood of messages began. Mom, Ava, please. I'm begging you. The guests are arriving. Just this once, can you help? Dad, no electricity. We can't cook. Where are you? Fix this. Now. Elise, are you serious right now? This is Mom's big day. She's about to cry. We have no internet. I can't reach anyone. Can you stop being selfish for once? I leaned back. My coffee was cold. The texts didn't feel satisfying. They didn't spark revenge or relief. Just a deep, unwavering emptiness. Then another notification. A video call. From Aunt Miriam, the only one in the family who still sent me holiday greetings, even if I rarely replied. I hesitated, then picked up. Her tired face appeared in the dim kitchen, lit only by a flashlight. Her eyes looked puffy, voice soft. Ava, she said, your mom's in full panic. The house is a mess. No one knows what to do. I said nothing, just stared at her. She paused, then gently added, not accusingly, you've never missed your mother's birthday. I'm sure there's a reason. But can you say something? I exhaled, keeping my voice steady. My father said I was an embarrassment to the family. He told me if I insisted on showing up, I shouldn't call him my father anymore. What would you do after that? Aunt Miriam didn't speak. Her face changed instantly, her expression tightening. In the background I heard chaos, my mother's voice rising. She's just sulking. No one would be so heartless to ruin today. Then another voice, sharper, more frantic. Elise, Julian's almost here. Someone call the electric company. I can't believe she did this. I smiled a small, humorless smile. Aunt Miriam heard it all. She didn't make excuses for anyone. She didn't try to smooth it over. Then the camera view shifted. A new face came into the frame. Julian. The same neatly pressed suit. The same composed look from his resume. He stared into the screen and said, almost in disbelief, Ava. Silence fell across the room. You're Ava Whitmore? The co-founder of Pacific Genomics. I nodded. Calm. Steady. Julian slowly turned toward the others. She's my direct supervisor. She approved my transfer to Boston. The silence deepened. Elise's mouth fell open. My parents froze, expressions locked in shock. I kept my voice neutral. Hope the rest of your introduction goes smoothly. And I ended the call. I set my phone down and said nothing more. Outside, the dim afternoon light filtered through the fog like a soft veil. My apartment was perfectly still. No follow-ups. No voicemails. No ringing. Just quiet. For once I didn't have to defend myself. The truth had revealed itself without me. Julian had confirmed what they'd never cared to ask. I wasn't just a background figure. I was the co-founder of the very company they thought I was merely working for. In that moment, their kitchen, once a place of judgment and performances, became a stage where every mask dropped. One by one. And Elise, my sister, the one who had whispered that I should pick a career easier to explain, now stood paralyzed next to a birthday cake no one had lit. She had worked so hard to impress Julian with surface-level charm and a picture-perfect family. But in the end, it was that very man who, in front of everyone, called me his boss. I could picture it clearly. My mother, so stunned she nearly dropped the tray. My father, flushed with embarrassment, gripping the edge of the table. The relatives, the ones who showed up only to eat and critique, now looking at one another, speechless. And Aunt Miriam, still holding the phone, now watching me with something different in her eyes. It wasn't pity. It was respect. She didn't say much. Just gave a small, quiet nod before ending the call. That evening, I received the first message from Elise. It was long, erratic, part accusation, part plea. You knew this entire time, didn't you? You let it happen. Right during the party. Mom hasn't stopped crying since yesterday. Julian didn't even know how to respond. Don't you think that was cruel, Ava? His message read. I saw the notification appear on my screen but didn't open it right away. Instead, I made myself a cup of ginger tea and curled up on the couch. The warmth of the steam loosened the tight knot in my throat. I didn't feel triumphant. But I didn't feel guilty either. 10 minutes passed before I opened his message and typed out a reply. Just a few clear, deliberate lines. You say I was cruel. But I was just at home. I didn't start the video call. I never claimed to be anyone's boss. I didn't do anything. And if a single truth was enough to unravel the entire day, then maybe that celebration wasn't built on anything real to begin with. I hit send. I wasn't waiting for a reply. Roughly 30 minutes later, another buzz, this time from my mother. Her message was short. I never imagined you'd use something like this to get revenge on the family. I leaned back in my chair, eyes closed. Revenge? Is that really what they thought this was? I remembered what it felt like to be told I shouldn't come home, that I made them look bad. I remembered the quiet sacrifices, over 2 years of bills paid, problem solved, support given, without a single call to ask how I was doing. I remembered trying so hard, over and over, just to be accepted. And I remembered the moment I finally stopped trying. Later that night, around 10, an email arrived from Julian. Ava, I'm sorry I didn't understand everything sooner. I respect what you've built and the way you carried yourself today. I've never felt more ashamed, but not because of you. I read it through once. Then replied slowly, carefully. Julian, you don't owe me an apology. We all choose how we see people. I never bring personal matters into work, and I won't now, but I hope you understand something. Sometimes the strongest move is silence. I sent the message, turned off my screen, and set the phone face down. Tomorrow would be another work day. Reports, emails, meetings, the usual rhythm. But something had shifted. Because now finally they knew who I was. No raised voice. No confrontation. Just the truth revealed on its own. And the silence that followed? That was their answer. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the office windows in soft golden streaks. The quiet calm before the day's busyness. I settled in, turned on my computer, and began sorting emails. In my priority inbox, one subject line stood out: apology and goodbye. It was from Julian. Ava, I've been thinking about everything since last night. Maybe it shouldn't have happened that way in front of everyone. But I also feel like I finally saw things clearly. I'm not ashamed to be your colleague. I'm ashamed that I didn't see Elise for who she really was. I can't stay in a relationship where respect doesn't exist. So today, I ended things with Elise. Thank you for staying quiet. Thank you for being the kind of leader people remember, strong, fair, and silent when it mattered most. I read the message twice, then leaned back in my chair. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was something quieter. A stillness like, finally, someone outside had seen what I had lived with for years. The quiet dismissals. The accusations of being too cold, too sensitive, too distant. All because I didn't react. I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. 2 hours later, as I was reviewing our finance team's latest report, my phone lit up. A message from Elise. Ava, I know you're busy, but could you please talk to Julian for me? He's misunderstanding everything. I looked at the screen, calm, unmoved. 5 minutes passed. Another message. You're his boss. You have influence. If you say something, he'll listen. Please. I stood and walked to the window, watching the world below, people moving about, unaware of the years I had spent waiting for this moment. Not revenge. Just recognition. All those years I had hoped for a single message from Elise, one word of encouragement when I was hurting, one question to ask if I was okay. But there had been nothing. And now that her world was unraveling, she came to me. Not to apologize, but to ask me to fix it. I returned to my desk and typed. Julian didn't walk away because of anything I said. He left because of who you are. And maybe for the first time he really saw it. She didn't respond right away. An hour later, a new message came. You're right. But I don't want to lose him. I'll change. Please, just this once. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. But because I was done explaining. That evening I stepped outside into the crisp early spring air. The sunset cast long orange streaks across the rooftops. I made my way to the parking lot slowly, not rushing, not thinking too hard. For the first time in a long while I felt light. Not because I had one, but because I had finally stopped carrying everything that wasn't mine. I hadn't sought revenge. I had simply lived in truth. And let the truth do what it always does, reveal. Elise had brought this unraveling on herself. And Julian, once enchanted by the illusion of a perfect family, had finally seen what stood beneath the reality I had lived quietly for years. That night, I played one of my old playlists. Songs from my startup days, the ones I used to listen to when I felt like no one noticed me. But now the melodies felt different. Like a quiet echo of power. I hadn't stepped into the spotlight by force. I had stood still and the world had turned to see. And that was something Elise or anyone else in my family had never expected. I no longer needed to prove my worth. I just needed to be me and live the life I had built, the one I deserved. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I almost ignored the sound of the doorbell. But something instinct maybe made me glance through the peephole. There they were. My parents standing quietly at the gate. I froze for a few seconds, letting my thoughts catch up with the sight. My mother held a small fabric bag, her expression weary. My father had his arms crossed, I still holding that familiar steel, though a little less harsh than during our last conversation. I opened the door without a word. Hi, honey, my mother greeted softly, her voice hoarse, as if she hadn't slept or had just come off a long trip. Can we come in for a few minutes? Just to talk. I stepped aside silently, letting them in. No embraces. No warmth. Just the weight of everything unsaid filling the hallway and following us into the living room. I poured water into 2 glasses, placed them on the table, and sat down across from them. My mom looked around the space, tidy, modest, and untouched by anything that resembled their influence. Then my dad spoke. About your mother's birthday. I said things I probably shouldn't have. I stayed quiet. He met my gaze briefly, then continued slower this time. Maybe we've been a little too hard on you. He paused. Elise is not doing great after the breakup, and your mom's been crying for days. We just thought we should sit down and talk as a family. Still, I said nothing. Just gave a small nod. I wanted to see where this was going, and I was used to the slow build-up before they revealed what they actually came for. Right on cue, my mother leaned forward. Well, we actually have something to ask. She hesitated, then opened the bag and pulled out a printed sheet. We've been thinking things through. You're doing well now, stable with a strong job. If possible, we'd like to ask for a monthly contribution. Around $2,000. Just enough to help cover living costs, insurance, and put a little toward retirement. I raised my eyes. $2,000 a month? My dad immediately jumped in, almost nervous. It's not much considering your income. We're family, Ava. I straightened my posture and kept my voice even. What about Elise? My mom looked down for a second. She's really struggling right now. Work hasn't been good. She's still hurt. We don't want to pressure her. I let out a soft, breathy laugh. Not out of bitterness, just because it was so predictable. Elise was always the one who couldn't be pressured, and I was always the one who could. I looked at them both. If Elise agrees to contribute her share, say $1,000, I'll consider it. But only under one condition. They stared confused. I want a contract. A written agreement stating that upon your passing, all assets, including the house, go to me. The room went silent. My father's face flushed. He leaned forward, his brow creasing. You're seriously asking your own parents for conditions? I didn't blink. They're not conditions. They're boundaries. I've already paid close to $16,000 over the last 2 years. And not once was it acknowledged. If you want my support, then we do this transparently. My mother turned to him, her voice cracking slightly. Maybe we should think it over. But my father stood abruptly, slamming his palm against the table. The glasses rattled. We raised you for over 20 years, and now you're demanding contracts? Unbelievable. I didn't move. My eyes stayed locked on his. If raising me was an investment you expect returns on, we can tally the numbers and call it even. But I won't continue paying for it in silence. He clenched his jaw. But he didn't speak again. My mother stood up, gently tugging at his arm. Let's go. I walked them to the door. No hugs. No final words. Once the door closed behind them, only the faint breeze drifting in from the balcony remained. In that quiet, I knew a chapter had ended. And this time I had written the last line. After that day, they never reached out again. No phone calls. No messages. No apologies. Nothing to acknowledge the storm they brought into my home. As if every disappointment in their lives could be pinned on the daughter who refused to play along. But I wasn't surprised. I had learned that kind of silence doesn't come from guilt or understanding. It comes from people who are only comfortable when they have control. So I kept going. Mornings with espresso and almond milk. Late nights in high-stakes meetings. Closing deals with investors who once doubted that a woman in her 30s could lead a biotech firm. And with each passing week, the guilt faded. I stopped feeling wrong for refusing to be the default wallet, the fixer, the one they could always lean on simply because I didn't fall apart easily. Because love shouldn't come with an invoice. It shouldn't require proof of income to qualify. If affection only lasted while the bills were paid, then that wasn't family. That was a contract. So I began severing the quiet strings that had tied me to the roles they had chosen for me. I changed my phone wallpaper from the old family photo to a shot of a mountain I hiked alone. I stopped checking dates for Elise's birthday. I stopped planning ahead for Christmas cards or just because packages. I no longer hovered over their vague, guilt-laced messages, waiting for an apology that never came. I had learned to end the sentence myself. I no longer waited for them to begin. One afternoon, during a weekly strategy meeting, Julian entered the conference room holding our latest investor report. Now the official head of finance, he worked with focus and quiet professionalism, always respectful, always at a careful distance. We never brought up Elise, not even once. And for that I was grateful. Some truths, once fully understood, don't need to be spoken aloud. That afternoon, as I stepped out of the office, a soft drizzle had started. I stopped by a familiar little cafe and took my favorite seat by the window. On the wall above the counter was a hand-carved wooden sign that read, "Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a choice." I wrapped my hands around a hot latte and sat in quiet reflection, thinking about the journey behind me. There was a time when I believed that being quiet, kind, and endlessly dependable would be enough to earn acceptance. But I've learned something. When you allow people to continuously disrespect you, they stop seeing your sacrifices as kindness and start treating them like responsibilities you owe them. Your silence becomes permission. So I stood up. Not to go to war with my family, but to finally stand for myself. I chose boundaries, not out of bitterness, but because I finally understood something fundamental. Self-worth should never depend on someone else's guilt, pity, or convenience. And if someone were to ask me today, "Ava, do you regret not helping your parents when they asked?" I'd say no. What I regret is how long it took me to realize I deserved better. Because real family sees you fully, not as a bank account, not as the one who's always available, not as a silent background character to someone else's spotlight. I know some people might struggle to accept my story. In our culture, stepping away from family duty is often labeled selfish or ungrateful. But before you judge, try standing in my shoes. Try being the daughter excluded from her own mother's birthday for not being impressive enough. The same daughter who paid tens of thousands quietly, never once asked how she was holding up. Who heard silence in return for every act of care. I didn't choose family in the way most people do. It chose me. And what about you? Do you think I was too cold? Or did I simply learn, finally, how to love myself at the right time? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes your story might be the very light someone else needs to see the path between duty and freedom. And if you've ever felt like a stranger in your own family, know this: you're not alone. Ava's story is a reminder that no one owes their identity to a title alone. A relationship called family must also be built on respect. When you set boundaries, choose self-worth, and refuse to let your kindness be exploited, that's not cruelty. That's growth. Ava didn't seek revenge. She chose dignified silence to reclaim her worth. And sometimes the firmest action is the quietest one, the first step toward real peace. So what do you think of Ava's choice? Was it harsh? Or was it necessary? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about identity, healing, and the courage to walk away from what no longer serves you.